Quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. While it's important to address the federal budget deficit, too many Washington politicians have turned a blind eye to the U.S. trade deficit. But working families in Ohio and our nation's manufacturers haven't forgotten about the devastating effects of our ballooning trade deficit. How much bigger does our trade deficit need to get before Washington wakes up and realizes we need a very different direction in trade? Let's put American workers and American businesses first for a change. Let's focus on enforcing existing trade laws and help workers retrain for new jobs. Let's not pursue the more of the same style of trade agreements that have wreaked havoc on our economy. That's really what the debate over the Korea trade agreement and the Panama and the Colombia free trade agreements, that's what the debate is all about. 2 weeks ago, Senator Casey and I led a letter of 43 senators signed by the senator, the presiding officer, the senator from Rhode Island, led a letter of 43 senators to the President affirming his decision to pass trade adjustment assistance for workers before proceeding to the trade agreements with Colombia, Panama, and South Korea. Our position on TAA has been consistent since we asked unanimous consent to pass TAA in late 2010. We need a long-term reauthorization regardless of what we do on these free trade agreements. Senator Casey and I stood on this floor time after time, starting in December, into January, into February, asking our colleagues, all of our colleagues, to reauthorize, to extend trade adjustment assistance to those workers who lose their jobs through no doing of their own. They lose their jobs because of trade agreements that this Congress has passed and because of a trade policy that this administration and Congress have followed. We're likely facing a situation in which TAA, unfortunately, is being linked with the free trade agreements. If and when a deal is reached, we'll examine both its contents and the process of moving it forward. But when it comes to American workers, we want at least a 5-year reauthorization of FAA, one that includes the 2009 reforms and provides for 80% health coverage tax credit. Mr. President, over time and time again, a Republican member stood up and said they object. Each time said he objects to our moving forward to help American workers. I just don't understand, Mr. President, how people here want to pass these trade agreements knowing that workers will be dislocated, people will lose jobs, plants will close down, people will lose jobs, communities will be devastated because of what actions this body takes passing trade agreements, yet they say, no, we don't want to do anything to help those workers. We continue. That's why, Mr. President, we believe that TAA should be separate from the free trade agreements. I ask my colleagues, especially those who call the free trade agreements with Korea and Panama and Colombia, the same people that called NAFTA and CAFTA and PNTR with China, that call these kind of actions, how they can say they're job creators. If that's the case, what sort of message does it send about these trade agreements if they must be linked to assistance for displaced workers? So they're saying the only way they want to do TAA is to connect it to Korea or connect it to Colombia or connect it to Panama. They're saying, they're acknowledging that when you pass these trade agreements, it's costing us jobs. Why would we do that, Mr. President? Because of that, Senator Casey and I want a clean vote on TAA and a trade enforcement package and want to work with our colleagues to shape this package. On the Korea Free Trade Agreement, I have two concerns. First is jobs, always jobs in these trade agreements. Ever since I've been here in the House and the Senate, every time there's a trade agreement, North American Free Trade Agreement in 1993, PNTR with China, not a trade agreement, but allowing China into the World Trade Organization. 2004 or 5, when the Central American, if I remember right, when the Central American Free Trade Agreement passed the Congress. Now with Korea. The people behind these trade agreements talk about all the jobs it's going to create. They tell us that, well, we're going to close our trade deficit because of these trade agreements. Never does that happen. When we passed NAFTA, we had a trade surplus with Mexico. Today, as Senator Casey pointed out today, we have a $90 billion trade deficit with Mexico. When China PNTR passed, we had about a my recollection 10 to 12 years ago was we had about a $10 or $12 billion trade deficit with China. Now our annual trade deficit with China is $273 billion last year. This year, in 1 month, it was $21 billion. So, Mr. President, it's pretty clear that these trade agreements, the promises and the reality are such different things. They don't create jobs. They don't close our trade deficit, yet the promises continue. So my first problem with the Korea Free Trade Agreement is jobs. The ITC, the International Trade Commission, projects the Korea FTA will increase the trade deficit, especially in auto parts, transportation equipment, metal and iron, and textiles and apparel. While the economy is still facing extreme challenges, while clearly, we have seen when President Obama took office, we were losing 700,000 jobs a month in January, February of 2009. The last 14 months, we've seen job growth. We've seen manufacturing job growth in the last 14 months, first time since 1998. Things are starting to turn around. But the last thing we do when the economy is facing extreme challenges, the last thing we should do is pass a trade agreement of this magnitude with its short-term and long-term effects on jobs. The administration, finally we have an administration that's being a little more truthful when it comes to promises about these trade agreements. As I said, during the NAFTA time, President Bush the first, President Clinton said it will provide all these jobs. 200,000 jobs, as I think one of them said. But this time, at least, the administration is saying that they aren't saying this is going to create jobs. They're saying this agreement is expected to support, whatever that means, 70,000 jobs. So let's do the math. The Congressional Budget Office said the cost of this trade agreement costs money. We lose a lot of money in tariffs. This trade agreement costs $7 billion over 10 years. That means if we're going to support, not create, support 70,000 jobs, spending $7 billion to do it, the agreement costs about $100,000 for every job supported. Again, not created, but every job supported. This trade pact has unusually low rules of origin, allowing goods from Korea that are made with up to 65% from their parts from China or other countries. When the European Union negotiated their Korea trade agreement, they had domestic content rules of 55%, meaning 55% of a product, of the components in a product, had to come from South Korea. Our administration, the Obama administration, improved this over the Bush agreement, but only marginally, says only 35% have to come from Korea. That means 65%. Two-thirds of the added value, the components of these products shipped from Korea, with basically no tariffs coming to the United States, 65% of that value added can come from China, or can come from a low-wage country in low and weak environmental laws, low worker standards, all of that. So it allows a backdoor for countries like China to gain even more access to the American market. We recognize we live in a world with global supply chains, but this very low domestic content threshold of 35% will clearly hurt American manufacturers over the long term. So be clear, this is not just a Korea Free Trade Agreement, it's effectively a global free trade agreement. Second thing the Korea FTA does that causes me major concern is what's called the investor-state enforcement, in which a corporation is empowered to directly challenge laws as violations of a trade pact. Now, before the North American Free Trade Agreement, Mr. President, there was no such thing as investor-state relations. That meant that a company could not sue a foreign government. For instance, if the Canadians were unhappy with some U.S. law, the Canadian government could sue the U.S. government, but a Canadian company couldn't sue the U.S. government. So what these investor-state provisions do, Mr. President, is it undermines sovereignty. It undermines what we've done in this body. We fight in this body for strong clean air laws and strong environmental rules and strong pure food laws and strong consumer protections. Well, under the investor-state relations, a company in Korea could sue the U.S. government for those kinds of strong environmental, workforce safety, or food safety laws. We don't want to give a company in another country the standing to undermine our sovereignty on laws that were democratically attained in this country. This mechanism is not necessary for a pact between two countries with well-established rules of law. We didn't do that in the U.S.-Australia Free Trade Agreement. It did not include these investor-state these investor-state provisions. Why would we do it now with Korea, which is also a country that operates under a rule of law? Mr. President, one more reason that this Korea Free Trade Agreement undermines our sovereignty, it weakens our environmental laws, it weakens our food safety laws, it weakens it dilutes what we stand for in the American values we hold so dear. So it's about jobs and it's about these investor-state provisions which undermine our sovereignty. Mr. President, before pursuing more of the same style of trade agreements that caused our trade deficit to balloon to more than $600 billion, why not focus on enforcing existing trade laws? We know some things we ought to be doing before we need to look at passing new trade agreements. We need to better enforce trade laws. We've done that. President Obama, to his credit, and again, I don't agree with him on these trade agreements. I think he's wrong. But to his credit, more than any president, I think, in at least 25 years, President Obama has begun to enforce some trade rules. He enforced on oil country tubular steel. His decision created hundreds of jobs in Youngstown and Lorain, Ohio. His decision on Chinese tires created hundreds of jobs in Findlay, Ohio, and other places around the state in tire building. His decisions and the Commerce Department's decisions on Chinese gaming the system on coated paper, an industry that the paper industry still exists in this country, not what it used to be, but it meant jobs in Southwest Ohio and all over my state and all over states where paper is still manufactured in this country. We also should look at other things we should do before a new trade agreement is we should consider reintroducing Super 301 so that we have the tools to fight back when countries like China game the system. I'm working with my colleague from Ohio, the Republican senator from Ohio, a Republican senator from Missouri, and a Democratic senator from Missouri and a Democratic senator from Oregon, Chairman Wyden of the Finance Committee's subcommittee, to begin to enforce customs duties and make sure that companies in countries that evade these customs duties can no longer invade them. That will make a huge difference in job creation. Those are the kinds of things we should be doing. Paul Krugman, who has been a free trader most of his life, he's a columnist for the New York Times, said back in December, he said, if you want a trade policy that helps employment, has to be a policy that induces other countries to run bigger deficits or smaller surpluses. A countervailing duty on Chinese exporting would be job-creating here. A deal with South Korea would not be. And, Mr. President, this comes from somebody, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, somebody who has been in the past supportive of these free trade agreements, believing that they have created jobs. He realizes that Korea won't create jobs. Beginning to enforce our trade laws is the way to go. Again, Mr. President, I would close with this, Mr. President, that some years ago President Bush said that for every $1 billion trade surplus or every $1 billion trade deficit a country has, that translates into 13,000 jobs. So, in other words, if we have a trade deficit with China of $1 billion, that would mean we're selling to them $1 billion less than we're buying from them. And the manufacture of those products that we buy versus the ones we manufacture and sell is a net loss to the United States of 13,000 jobs. So for every $1 billion trade surplus or trade deficit, it translates into 13,000 jobs for that country. Mr. President, think about this. The trade deficit with China last year was $273 billion. The trade deficit that we have with the entire world, the so-called multilateral trade deficit, was $634 billion. Mr. President, travel this state, my state, travel this country, see the kinds of manufacturing job loss we've had. We have lost manufacturing jobs from 1998, the last 2 years of the Clinton administration, all 8 years of the Bush administration, in the first year and a half of the Obama administration. We were losing manufacturing jobs through that whole process. Now we're starting to gain manufacturing jobs, but we can't continue to gain manufacturing jobs when we pass free trade agreements that clearly cause more companies to shut down in our country and more companies and those companies to move abroad. Mr. President, the Korea trade agreement's a bad idea. it's imperative that we do what the President said we should do and what so many of my colleagues have asked us to do, and that is pass trade adjustment assistance with health coverage tax credit for those workers that have already lost jobs from trade agreements and from trade policy. It's the right thing to do. It's good for our country, it's good for our economy, and it's especially good for workers. Mr. President, I yield the floor. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the period for morning business be extended until 6:30, with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Thank you.